Good evening. This is the 8-hour workday with Rex Haymarket, where every crisis somehow becomes your bill and their bonus. This week, Donald Trump came back from meeting Xi Jinping, talking about trade, leverage, tariffs, manufacturing, and the future of the American economy. And whether you like Trump or hate him is honestly beside the point, because eventually, every American administration runs into the same problem. China did not become the thing America expected it to become. America thought globalization would turn China into a bigger version of us. Instead, China used globalization to build something completely different, and now the global economy is trapped inside it. For years, Americans were told a very simple story. China was communist, America was capitalist. Globalization would modernize China. Free markets would liberalize the system, and eventually China would converge with the West. That did not happen. Instead, China built a hybrid system that is difficult for Western audiences to categorize. It has markets, private companies, billionaires, competition, stock exchanges. But it also has state-controlled banking, industrial planning, massive infrastructure coordination, tight political control, and long-term national economic direction. It is not classical communism, but it is also not American capitalism. And that difference matters enormously, because America optimized for financial returns. China optimized for industrial capacity. Those are not the same thing. In America, corporations increasingly became financial instruments. Quarterly earnings, stock buybacks, asset appreciation, shareholder value. Entire industries were hollowed out because manufacturing something in America became less profitable than outsourcing it. China went the other direction. The Chinese state aggressively pushed industrial production, infrastructure, exports, engineering, shipping, energy systems, and manufacturing scale. The goal was not simply making money, the goal was becoming indispensable, and it worked. Look around your house, your phone, your television, your batteries, your appliances, your electronics, your solar panels, your consumer goods. Large portions of modern life move through Chinese industrial supply chains. That did not happen accidentally, it was planned. Now here is where things get more complicated. One of the biggest misconceptions Americans have about China is that it has some giant socialist welfare state. It really doesn't. Chinese households often carry enormous financial pressure themselves. Healthcare, education, retirement, housing. Families save aggressively because the system forces them to. And when households save instead of consume, the economy behaves differently. America became consumption-driven. China became production-driven. America buys, China builds. That difference shaped the modern global economy, and it explains why China became obsessed with exports. Because if domestic consumption is weaker, then industrial output has to go somewhere, which means trade expansion, manufacturing scale, and global supply chain dominance become existential priorities. This is why every administration eventually discovers decoupling from China is far harder than campaign speeches suggest. Because modern globalization was literally built around Chinese industrial scale. Now let's talk about something else Americans misunderstand, the famous social credit score. The internet turned this into a kind of science fiction horror story, a Black Mirror system where every citizen gets points for behavior. Reality is more complicated. China absolutely has extensive surveillance systems, internet controls, financial blacklists, digital monitoring. But the viral version most people imagine was heavily exaggerated, and honestly, that misunderstanding reveals something important. A lot of Americans still understand China through old Cold War mythology. Meanwhile, modern China looks increasingly like a cyberpunk industrial superstate built around infrastructure, logistics, and manufacturing coordination. Which brings us to the part that tends to shock Western visitors: the cities. Many Americans still imagine China as factories from the 1990s. Then they land in Shenzhen, or Shanghai, or Chongqing. And suddenly the conversation changes, because modern Chinese megacities often look like a prototype of the future. Mass transit, high-speed rail, dense urban construction, integrated logistics, massive airports, gigantic skylines built in astonishingly short time frames. Now, to be clear, China has major problems: debt, real estate bubbles, weak consumer demand, demographic decline, political repression, youth unemployment. This is not a utopia, but what unnerves many Western leaders is not that China failed. It's that China succeeded in building capacity at a scale the West increasingly struggles to replicate. And when American politicians actually visit modern Chinese infrastructure, many realize they are not dealing with the China they imagined 20 years ago. They are dealing with an economic machine designed for scale. Which brings us back to Trump, or, frankly, any American president. Because eventually every administration runs into the same reality. America became dependent on a system it thought it controlled. A system built by a country that did not become Western. And now the United States is trying to answer an uncomfortable question. How do you compete with a country that optimized itself for production while you optimized yourself for finance? That is the real story underneath the headlines. Not simply politics, not simply tariffs, not simply trade deals, but two fundamentally different economic systems colliding inside the same global economy. And that collision is increasingly showing up in prices, jobs, technology, housing, energy, supply chains, and your household bills. Because every global system eventually becomes personal, and every geopolitical rivalry eventually lands in someone's grocery cart. This is Rex Haymarket, and this has been the 8-hour workday. Mind the static, and mind who profits from the noise.